Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to be showing you about the MigrationWiz PowerShell SDK. Very, very powerful back-end functionality that you can have inside the MigrationWiz without having to do everything through the GUI. You can do things with PowerShell. You can create projects. You can add things to it. You can kick off migrations, add agents. All the stuff that you do in the UI for MigrationWiz, you'll find you can do the majority of it through that SDK. So if you've got automation tasks that you want to do, then the SDK is perfect for that. I recall a migration I've done where there was around, I think, 30 or so thousand users in there, split over, I think, about 150 different projects. Obviously, if I wanted to kick those off at the same time or in very sort of quick succession of each other, all these projects for that big bang approach that we did, going through and clicking on each one and starting each one was going to be quite laborious. So using the SDK, I was able to then fire those commands at the back end and say, start these particular migration jobs. And of course, they all just ran through very quickly and did that. So there's definitely some reasons why you'd want to know about the SDK and just to use it, get familiar with it. If you use PowerShell a lot, then this really is a perfect add-on for you. Can really help you automate a lot of the things you do inside the MigrationWiz in the back end. So let's show you how we download that, get it installed, and actually connect to MigrationWiz. And I'm going to show you a few of the basic tasks we can do. Then I'll show you where the repository is for all the sample scripts that we have published inside the MigrationWiz GitHub library. So you can download those and really customize those and to do whatever you need to do. So first of all, the best way to find it is just do a quick Google search on there put in BitTitan MigrationWiz SDK. The first thing that comes up is going to be the help desk article saying how to install it. So click on that and you'll see down here, it will then give you this link here, which is the MSI for the install. So we're going to go into that and download it. So once that's there, we just run that file and you can see there, info, that is quite normal. That is perfectly okay to go ahead and do. We'll say next, accept those terms. And that will go ahead and install that for us. There we go, nice and easily done. Now what it will do is it will create a menu item of your start menu for Windows PowerShell. Obviously, you can see it was enabled BitTitan Command Shell, and that gives you the access into that command shell. Now, personally, I like to use the ISE instead. So I'm going to run that and show you how to import that module into the ISE instead. And what you'll notice is when you downloaded this file, underneath here, you can see there's the SDK introduction. Now, in there happens to be this import module command, which you can copy and paste into your ISE, into here, and just run that. I'll have it very quickly. And if we refresh the modules that are available to us here, we should get the BitTitan PowerShell module showing up. So if I go to modules and just drop down to B, there it is there, BitTitan PowerShell, and you can see there's all the commandlets that we can use. So there's quite extensive amounts of items that you can do with this. So how it works with the authentication is it works on the basis of a ticket that it collects. So what you need to do is, first of all, you would connect to the BitTitan backend itself with your normal login, and that creates like a ticket for like a BT ticket. And with that ticket, you can then attach to different work groups with the MigrationWiz commandlets, and you create like a MigrationWiz ticket. Once you've got that open and you're in the correct work group and doing things, then all the commands are open to you to access things inside that particular work group. So let's go ahead now and let's authenticate against the BitTitan backend and get the BT ticket, and then I'll show you how to get the MigrationWiz ticket as well. Now, every command that I'm going to be running here is in this PowerShell documentation. So if you need to reference any of those and copy and paste them yourself, then just have a look at that documentation. They are all there. So I'm going to, in this case, though, create a new one and paste in there. First one, which is obviously the normal get BT ticket. And it's going to say with the get credential. You could store them in there yourself if you want to put them as a secure string-based password and put the credential in. You can. In this case, I'm just going to get it to ask me for those credentials and get that ticket back. So if we run that one now and put my credentials in, that should go ahead and create that ticket. Now I've pasted this in from that same documentation. I'm now going to scope that ticket to that workgroup. So we'll select those and run that. And it's asking for the workgroup ID. Now that workgroup ID is, if you go to your Migration Wiz screen, there's your workgroup. So I'm going to use this section here. In fact, I might just go back to the widgets Inc. from a previous video, but we'll do it through that one. You can see there's my current workgroup. I'm going to grab that item and put that into this guy here. See, it drops back, no errors, which means it's done it okay. So really that variable workgroup ticket is the BitTitan ticket associated with that particular workgroup. So if we look at that, let's do a workgroup ticket, make sure it does exist, and there you see there it is there, which is very good. So it means we now have authenticated access into the workgroup inside the BitTitan backend. So now we want to create something inside the Migration Wiz. So we're going to pick up a Migration Wiz ticket so we can start doing Migration Wiz tasks with this SDK. So again, I've pasted that in from the documentation. Now, what we don't need to do is actually run this one. This is what comes up in the documentation. Obviously, if you were putting in credentials, you'd put that in. But in this case, I'm going to tab that out and just run this command. And that will then use the details that we have already and grab that ticket. There we go. If I run this to view the ticket, it should come back and say, yes, we do have one, which is obviously good as well. Our next task in there is to make a connection into the project itself. And then we do that with this command here, which is the get mailbox connector. Using that MW ticket we have here, we specify what the project name is and the connector which we'll use there, and run that. That will just drop back as well. So now we have a connection into the SDK demo project itself now. I'm going to drop two other commands in here, and they are, that out, put them together. What it's going to do now is actually look up, get the mailbox items from that whole batch, and I just want to display the import and the export email addresses and the ID. Now the ID is obviously very important for the other tasks we want to process on them. So if we just run that one, you'll see there is our list of users. Now if I drop this away here, you can see that that corresponds to these users here, and that is our list with the ID references. Now notice it's the start of the ID that changes, not the back end. So if you're looking for a difference here, it is going to be this item down here. Now, my task in here, I'm going to kick off some of these migrations and do the verify credentials through the PowerShell command, but I'm going to add somebody as well, show you how to do that. So that's the command here, which is add MW mailbox. So we assign it obviously with the ticket, the MW ticket, and the connector ID that we've grabbed as well. And then we specify the export and the import. So that's going to be the source, that's going to be the destination, and we're going to give it an active. That's saying what type of mailbox is it going to be looking at? Is it the active one? Is it the archive? Or what is it up to? So we're going to run that one there. So if I just run that command, goes in. I'm going to go back to this screen here and just refresh here, and we should see, there we are. There's our Fred Smith down the bottom that's just been added in that not submitted stage. And you can see if I go and edit that, you can see it's looking at, there's our mailbox status options. There's the active that I was talking about there just before. So let's go back to our project screen here. And let's suppose we want to kick off that Fred Smith. We want to do a verify task on that one. So how do we go about doing that? Well, first of all, we're going to need that ID. So what we'll do again is actually run this again. And it should show, here's our Fred Smith, and there's our ID of that account. So we're going to grab that out. And what we've done here is just build this little command. So we're going to add, as you can see, mailbox migration with the same ticket number, the same connector ID as we did before. There's the mailbox ID that we're going to be working on, and the user ID, which is the user ID connected to the ticket. This is a default item here as well. And we're going to use the type, which is verification. Now, if I just get rid of the verification, just so you can see that, we do type space there, you can see what we're doing. You've got the full migration and also the trial, and we're going to do the verification there. So let's kick off that one. And what we should see once that does that is if we go back into our project and hit the refresh, we should see that Fred Smith, you can see it's gone into a submitted stage. So it has accepted that straight away, obviously. Now, what I could do is I could bind those two together to actually kick off a migration immediately. So what I might just do there is just take this command and just put this down here. And we'll create this one, just create a dummy one. We'll call him FredSmith3. And put FredSmith3 as well. Obviously the standard one for just mailbox. What we'll do though, however, is I'm going to take this command, put this underneath, and I'm going to say instead of using the mailbox ID and actually having to look it up and paste it in, what we could do is we could take mailbox.id from there. What that'll do is it'll take the mailbox ID that it obtained from this item here, drop it into this next line, and then kick that off for us. So let's just run those two together, and you'll see that if I start that, what we'll do is if I go back to the console now and actually just do a refresh, we should see FredSmith3, and you can see that straight into a submitted stage for the verification of those credentials. You could start a full migration like that as well. You could add somebody in and kick off a migration for them immediately as well as. But you can see that's a nice easy way to not have to look up the IDs. You can just bind them in like so. So that's all well and good. We can add people in there. We can kick off migrations like that as such. If you wanted to kick off everybody in a batch, obviously you could just do this with a very simple one, which is just really getting all of the mailboxes and then piping that through that mailbox migration output as well. So let's go ahead and do that. If we say grab all those mailbox items there, and then we just do a quick for each command, which will be, let's call it MD in mailbox items like that, and we'll just pipe that through. Add MW mailbox migration using the ticket, which is the MW ticket there, with the connector ID of, what are we going to call that? Connector.id. The mailbox ID is just going to be straight from here, so that's going to be mb.id, and we've got the user ID, which will be the from the MW ticket user ID. The type we're going to have there is going to be verification, like so, and there. And we'll grab all of those and run it and see what it does. You can see it's picking those out. Now, you can see here it's got a couple of fails, and these are because these ones are already in existence. But if I jump back to the console here and do a refresh, there we go. Everything is in that submitted stage now. It is good. A nice, easy way to kick them all off for that verification. Now, we want to keep an eye on the status of them. And what we can do is we can then obviously hit refresh in here and keep an eye on it that way. But let's have some PowerShell commands to come back with what the status is of each one of these verifications. So how we go about doing that, I'm going to grab these two items here, paste those in here, and we're going to grab the status. Now, the status comes from performing a quick get MW mailbox migration like that. We'll give it the same ticket details like that, the connector ID. So, and then the mailbox ID, obviously it needs as well, which will be mailbox ID there from mb.id like that. And we'll then write that out. So we'll just do a write host, and we'll put in first, it'll be the mb dot, and that'll be we'll put the import email address, and then we'll give it the status. So we'll just do a tab and another tab, and then we want the status dot status like so. Now, when I run this, what you're going to notice when I kick that off is you're getting a few statuses here for each one of what is it's submitted, they failed in the past. You're going to get an array of the status, not just the status itself. So what I'm going to put in here is a 0, which will give us the most recent item. You can see if I run that again, I will just get the current status, which matches what we have in our console there. In addition to that, I could also put in from here, let's put in the status and the type of migration that it is, and run that. And you can see we're kind of building out a lot more functionality in what we're doing here, but you can see here it's talking about verification. So I'm going to put the type again, the 0 there, and run that again, and that will give us the more correct output. There you can see. So completed verification, we've got some failed, queued, processing. So really you can then start to build what you want to do with these scripts around what is going on. You can see these failures are there because obviously I've got some fictitious names in here for this particular project, as you can see, but you can see that's really giving us a real world example of what it might actually look like when we start to do these things and come back. Bob Jones is the only one that actually exists on that Plenium tenant, by the way. So that's a bit of a start on how you might connect in, get these tickets done, and start adding people into a migration, checking status. There's a ton of stuff you can do with that. And let me show you where you can find some example scripts so really sort of get stuck into creating more and more with this. If we go back to the help desk article here, you can see it talks about installing SDK. That's where we got this file from originally. But if we jump back up to this level here, what you can see here is we then start having the main help desk function. If we look at the introduction to the BitTitan SDK here, what I'm looking for here is this link. There's a GitHub repository. Now this is very useful to know where it is, because what it does, you can see here, there's the building blocks. But if we jump back to the main PowerShell screen here, you can look at automated examples. So if we look at in this section and look at, say, migration whiz, you can see here is a lot of different scripts that you can have. Let's say any of these you can just go into and just pull up the whole script. If we go back to that building blocks one, you can see if we look at migration whiz there as well, creating projects, starting migration. You can see that's where some of this code comes from that I was using in this particular demonstration. But you can see there's a lot more in here that you can then obviously have a look around and perform all these tasks with. So do have a look at this, and you can see here lots of different scripts that really give you a lot more functionality in this whole SDK. You can do, as I keep saying, a lot of stuff you can do in there. So thank you for watching that. I hope that was useful in getting a start into the BitTitan SDK. Please go through those help desk articles, have a look at how you install it, how you run it, and how you get started with it. And remember, obviously, the PowerShell commands are very powerful, and they can obviously do things directly inside the tenant that you have without asking you for confirmation yes or no. So please be careful with what you run inside there when you're kicking off migrations and adding things in. Run some tests on the scripts that you're doing first. But essentially, it is a very, very important and powerful tool that you can use, is to have this whole PowerShell SDK in the background. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.